"Ma'am, please cooperate or we'll have to restrain you," the man in scrubs said firmly, his grip tightening on my arm. My heart pounded as I struggled against him, panic rising in my chest. "What is this? Why are you doing this to me?" I screamed, looking around frantically, searching for Nathaniel, for anyone who could explain what was happening. But all I saw were strangers, cold, expressionless faces dragging me out of my home like I was some kind of criminal. "My name is Charlotte Anderson, and I'm 32 years old. Up until a few weeks ago, I thought the worst thing that could ever happen to me was losing my father, Joshua Anderson, in a tragic plane crash. He was my rock, my hero, the only family I had left. But that morning, as I was forced into an unmarked van and taken to a place I didn't understand, I realized my nightmare had only just begun. My husband, Nathaniel, the man I trusted with my life, was nowhere to be found. The drive felt like it lasted forever, though I couldn't tell you exactly how long. My sense of time was warped by the panic coursing through my veins. I tried asking questions, begging for answers, but no one would speak to me. The van smelled sterile, like disinfectant, and the hum of the engine was the only sound. When we finally stopped, the doors opened to reveal a tall, ominous building surrounded by a high fence. A chill ran down my spine as they led me inside, their hands gripping my arms like I might bolt at any second. The place felt wrong from the moment I stepped through the doors. The walls were an unwelcoming shade of beige, and the faint smell of cleaning chemicals mixed with something sour lingered in the air. People in white coats moved briskly through the halls, avoiding eye contact, as if I didn't exist. I asked again, demanded, really, what this was about. "There's been a misunderstanding," I said, my voice cracking. "You have the wrong person." But no one answered. Instead, they handed me a plain set of clothes and told me to change. As soon as I stepped inside, a tall man in a crisp white coat approached me, his expression unsettlingly calm. "Ms. Anderson, I'm Dr. Paul Reynolds," he said, extending a hand I couldn't bring myself to shake. "I'm the director here, and I want to assure you that you're in a safe place." His voice was steady, almost soothing, but there was a coldness in his eyes that made my stomach churn. I didn't feel safe, not even close. "What is this place? Why am I here?" I demanded, my voice trembling. He sighed, as if he'd dealt with this 100 times before. "I understand you're confused, but this is for your own good," he said, ignoring my question. "Your husband expressed deep concerns about your well-being following your father's passing. He's worried about you, Charlotte." My blood ran cold at the mention of Nathaniel. This wasn't concern. This was a betrayal. Not long ago, my life seemed perfect. I had a loving husband, a beautiful home, and the kind of life most people could only dream of. My father, Joshua Anderson, was my anchor, the man who had raised me single-handedly after my mom died when I was a little girl. He was my hero, my protector, and the one person who truly understood me. But everything came crashing down when his private jet went down without warning. One phone call was all it took to shatter my world. I remember the exact moment I got the call. I was in the middle of organizing a fundraiser for one of my father's charities when my phone buzzed. "Ms. Anderson, we're so sorry to inform you." The rest of the words blurred as my knees buckled and I sank into the nearest chair. A plane crash. No survivors. It felt unreal, like some cruel joke. My dad, my hero, was gone. Days later at the funeral, I stood next to my husband as condolences from strangers poured in. The grief was overwhelming, but nothing prepared me for the aftermath, the cold, clinical reading of my father's will, where I learned I was the sole heir to everything he had built. The weight of the Anderson empire was now mine to carry, and I didn't even have time to process the loss before I was thrust into a world of boardrooms and financial decisions I never asked for. Days later, at the funeral, I stood next to my husband, Nathaniel, and his mother, Martha, as condolences from strangers poured in. Martha gripped my hand tightly, her eyes brimming with what seemed like sympathy. But something about her touch felt off, too firm, too calculated. The grief was suffocating, a haze that dulled everything around me, but I tried to focus on my father's memory, as the man who built an empire and still managed to be my everything. But nothing prepared me for what came after, the cold, clinical reading of my father's will. Nathaniel sat beside me, offering quiet reassurance as the lawyer explained the details. "Charlotte, you are the sole heir to your father's estate," he said, his voice steady. "Everything, his shares in Anderson Steel, the properties, the investments, was mine." I remember glancing at Nathaniel, who gave me a small, supportive smile, and then at Martha, whose face was unreadable. The weight of the Anderson empire landed squarely on my shoulders, and I barely had time to process the loss before I was thrust into a world of boardrooms, legalities, and decisions I never asked for. Now I was sitting in a stark, cold room inside a mental institution, and I still didn't understand what was happening to me. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the walls were an empty, lifeless beige. My head was spinning with questions, but no answers were coming. I replayed Dr. Reynolds's words over and over in my mind. "This is for your own good. Your husband is deeply concerned about you." Concerned? Nathaniel had never mentioned anything about this, and how could he do this without even speaking to me? Every time I asked for an explanation, I was met with the same dismissive response. "It's all in your best interest." My best interest? Being locked away in this place? I wasn't even allowed to contact Nathaniel, or anyone for that matter. They gave me some pills shortly after I arrived, something to help me relax. I tried refusing, but a nurse stood over me until I swallowed them. Not long after, everything became hazy. My body felt heavy, my thoughts sluggish. It was like they were trying to erase me, one pill at a time. When I woke up, the first thing I noticed was the silence. It wasn't the kind of peaceful quiet you find in a comforting space. It was hollow, eerie, and oppressive. I opened my eyes to see a stark white room with nothing but a narrow bed and a steel chair in the corner. The walls were completely bare, the kind of blankness that felt intentionally dehumanizing. For a moment, I thought I might be dreaming, but the stiffness in my body told me otherwise. My head throbbed and my mouth was dry as if I hadn't had water in days. I tried to sit up, but my limbs felt weak, like I'd been asleep for hours, or maybe even days. The air smelled sterile, sharp with a faint chemical edge, and the faint hum of a distant machine was the only sound. Panic bubbled in my chest as I scanned the room for any sign of familiarity or explanation. There was nothing. No clock, no window, not even a mirror. Just the emptiness. I called out weakly, "Hello? Is anyone there?" My voice cracked, barely more than a whisper, and the only response was my own echo. The silence became unbearable. The more I sat there, the heavier the weight on my chest grew. Panic turned into anger, and before I knew it, I was on my feet, slamming my fists against the cold, unyielding walls. "Let me out!" I screamed, my voice breaking with each word. "What is this place? Someone tell me what's going on." My hands stung with every impact, but I didn't stop. The frustration, the confusion, the betrayal, it all boiled over until I was pounding on the door with everything I had. I didn't even hear the door open behind me. A nurse appeared, holding a syringe in one hand, her face blank, almost robotic. "Please calm down, Ms. Anderson," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. I stumbled back, shaking my head, but before I could react, she grabbed my arm with surprising force and plunged the needle into it. "No, stop!" I shouted, but it was too late. The room began to spin, and my legs gave out beneath me. My last thought before everything went black was that this couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of nightmare. The next 2 weeks passed in a haze, though I only realized how much time had gone by when I overheard a nurse mentioning it to another staff member. I spent most of my days in a drugged stupor, barely aware of my surroundings. The medication dulled everything, my emotions, my thoughts, even the physical sensations of my own body. I couldn't muster the strength to ask questions anymore. The Charlotte I knew, the one who fought, who demanded answers, felt like a distant memory. I'd wake up briefly, eat the tasteless food they brought me, and then drift back into unconsciousness. My dreams were fragmented and strange, filled with distorted faces and muffled voices. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of Nathaniel in those dreams, but I couldn't tell if it was my mind playing tricks on me or if I was clinging to the last bit of hope I had left. Each time I woke, I felt heavier, like I was sinking deeper into a void I couldn't escape. I wasn't living. I was just existing, and that terrified me more than anything. I stared at her for a moment, trying to gauge if she was serious or just messing with me. Her eyes didn't waver, and there was something about the way she held herself, calm but sharp, like she was always calculating. I was confused and wary, but what choice did I have? I was desperate, and for the first time in weeks, someone had spoken to me like I was a person, not just another sedated patient. "What do you mean?" I whispered back, my voice hoarse from disuse. Lily leaned in closer, her voice barely audible. "This place isn't just for the mentally ill," she said, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "People end up here because someone wants them gone. You think you're the first?" My stomach twisted at her words, but I didn't have time to process them before she sat back, acting like nothing had happened. "You can either trust me or you can stay here and rot," she said casually, stabbing her fork into a sad pile of carrots. Trouble or not, I knew one thing. She might be my only chance to get out of this hell. Later that day, during the brief free time they allowed us in the common area, Lily found me again. She sat down next to me, keeping her tone casual as if we were old friends chatting. "I've gotten out of here before, you know," she said, twirling a strand of her dark hair between her fingers. I glanced at her, trying to mask my surprise. "You've escaped?" I whispered, barely believing what I was hearing. She nodded, a smirk tugging at the corner of her mouth. "A few times. It's not as hard as you think, but they always find me. The streets aren't exactly forgiving, and I stick out too much after a few days. They catch me, bring me back, drug me up for a while, and act like I never left." Her voice was steady, almost nonchalant, but I could see a flicker of frustration in her eyes. "But you," she added, looking straight at me. "You're different. You don't belong here, and you've got something they want to keep locked away. That makes you dangerous to them, and that means we have a better chance if we work together." Lily leaned in closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "I got caught again the day before you arrived," she admitted, her smirk fading for the first time. "I was so close, but they picked me up a few streets over. Same routine, dragged me back here, pumped me full of meds, and threw me in isolation for a few days. But this time, I've been watching, studying the new guards. They're not as sharp as the old ones." I raised an eyebrow, skeptical but intrigued. "New guards?" I asked quietly, my voice trembling with both curiosity and fear. She nodded, her dark eyes glinting with determination. "Yeah, the night shifts especially. They're lazy, distracted. I've been mapping their routines during meals, free time, and lights out. I know when the hall cameras are watched and when they aren't." She glanced around the room, her gaze darting between the other patients and the staff. "If we do this right, they won't even see us coming." For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't dared to feel. Hope. Over the next few days, Lily and I quietly started piecing together a plan. She'd whisper to me during meals, or in the common room when no one was close enough to overhear. Every detail mattered. What time the night shift guards switched, which doors were left unlocked for staff convenience, and the quickest route to the outer gate. "Timing is everything," Lily said one evening, her voice barely audible as she pretended to stir her bland soup. "If we get caught, it's game over. They'll double the meds and we'll never get another chance." We decided on 2 nights from then, during the dead hours when the staff was at its laziest. Lily would create a distraction near the nurses' station to pull their attention, while I slipped into the hallway with a stolen keycard she had managed to swipe during one of her earlier outings. Once the hall was clear, we'd meet at the back exit and slip out through a maintenance door she swore hadn't been locked in months. "It's risky," she said, her voice serious for the first time, "but it's the only shot we've got." I nodded, swallowing hard. Risky didn't even begin to cover it, but staying here wasn't an option. The night of the escape, my heart pounded so loudly I was sure it would give us away. Lily's timing was flawless. She managed to knock over a cart near the nurse's station, sending trays and equipment crashing to the floor. The noise echoed through the halls, drawing the attention of the guards like clockwork. I slipped out of the common room, clutching the stolen keycard so tightly it dug into my palm. My legs still felt weak from the medication, but adrenaline pushed me forward. Lily met me at the maintenance door, her face flushed but focused. We were halfway to the outer wall when the shouts started. "Stop them! They're escaping!" My chest tightened as I glanced back to see 2 guards sprinting toward us, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Panic surged through me, but Lily grabbed my arm and pointed ahead. "Go! The wall's just up there," she hissed. I didn't have time to think. I ran toward the towering barrier, every step burning as if my legs might give out. When I reached the wall, I clawed at the rough surface, forcing myself to climb even though my arms felt like lead. Behind me, I heard Lily yell, "Keep going, Charlotte, don't stop." My heart sank as I looked back and saw her standing firm, facing the guards. She grabbed a loose piece of wood from the ground and swung it wildly, buying me precious seconds. "Go!" she screamed again. My breath caught as I reached the top of the wall, pulling myself over with every ounce of strength I had left. The last thing I saw before dropping to the other side was Lily, defiant to the end, as the guards closed in on her. I don't know how I managed to find the strength to climb that wall after so many days of being pumped full of heavy medication. My muscles ached, my head was spinning, and every movement felt like I was dragging my body through quicksand. But when you're fighting to survive, something primal kicks in. You find strength you didn't know you had, fueled by fear, desperation, and the sheer will to escape. My fingers clawed at the rough concrete, scraping and burning as I pulled myself up inch by inch. The sounds of Lily struggling with the guards echoed behind me, her shouts urging me on. My arms screamed in protest, my legs felt like they might give out any second, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. With one final heave, I threw myself over the top and tumbled to the ground on the other side, the impact jarring but freeing. For the first time in weeks, I felt the cool night air on my skin. I was out, but my heart ached knowing Lily had stayed behind to make it happen. The next 2 days were a blur of fear and exhaustion. I didn't have a plan, no idea where to go or who to trust. The streets were cold and unforgiving, and every noise, every car horn, every passing stranger sent my heart racing. I kept to the shadows, ducking into alleys and abandoned buildings whenever I thought someone might be following me. I was terrified they'd find me, drag me back to that awful place, and lock me away for good. My body felt like it was running on fumes. The medication still lingered in my system, making me feel sluggish and disconnected, and the little food I found barely took the edge off the hunger gnawing at me. I barely slept, too afraid that someone would recognize me or report me to the authorities. The world outside was supposed to be freeing, but instead, it felt like a cage of its own. My mind kept going back to Lily. Was she okay? Had she paid the price for helping me? The guilt was overwhelming, but I couldn't let it stop me. I had to keep moving. After 2 days of hiding on the streets, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed help, and the only person I could think of was Jonathan Sachs. But I wasn't stupid. I couldn't just announce myself. I'd managed to collect enough spare change by holding out an old coffee cup on a busy corner, avoiding eye contact with everyone who passed. Humiliation aside, it was enough to get me to a payphone. I dialed the Anderson Steel main number, my fingers shaking as I pressed each button. When the receptionist answered, her tone was clipped and professional. "Good morning, Anderson Steel. How may I direct your call?" I hesitated for a second before lying through my teeth. "Hi, this is Anna Collins," I said, trying to sound composed. "I'm a former colleague of Jonathan Sachs, and I need to speak with him right away." There was a pause, and my heart raced as I imagined her questioning my story. But then she said, "One moment, please," and the line clicked to hold. I let out a shaky breath, clinging to the faint hope that he'd actually pick up. When the line finally connected, I heard Jonathan's voice on the other end. It was steady and professional, just as I remembered from the few times I'd seen him with my father. "This is Jonathan Sachs," he said. I hesitated, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Jonathan," I started, my voice trembling. "It's me, Charlotte." There was a long pause, and I could hear the faint rustling of papers in the background. "Charlotte?" he finally said, his tone a mix of disbelief and caution. "Where are you? Everyone thought—" I cut him off before he could finish. "I can't tell you where I am," I said quickly, glancing over my shoulder as if someone might be watching. "But I need your help. I've been locked away in a mental institution, Jonathan. They drugged me. They said I was a danger to myself, but it's not true." My voice cracked, and I could feel the tears threatening to spill. "It was Nathaniel and his mother. They did this to me." When the line clicked and I heard Jonathan's voice, steady and professional, I took a deep breath to steady myself. "Jonathan," I said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was nearby. "It's me, Charlotte." There was a pause, and I could almost hear his confusion. "Charlotte? Where have you been? Everyone thought—" I cut him off, my voice sharper than I intended. "I can't explain over the phone. I need you to meet me, alone." He hesitated, and I could hear the doubt creeping into his tone. "Charlotte, are you okay? What's going on?" I pushed through the knot in my throat. "Please, Jonathan, just meet me. And you have to swear to me you won't tell Nathaniel or Martha." Another pause, longer this time, before he finally said, "All right, where do you want to meet?" Jonathan arrived at the park just as the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the empty benches. I stayed hidden near a tree, watching him from a distance for a moment to make sure he was alone. When I finally stepped out, his face went pale. "Charlotte," he said, his voice low, almost disbelieving. "You look— God, what's happened to you?" I motioned for him to sit, too drained to respond right away. We settled on a bench far from the main path, the distant sounds of children playing barely registering in my ears. "They took everything from me," I began, my voice trembling as I tried to keep my composure. "Nathaniel and Martha. They're behind all of this. After my father died, they had me declared mentally unstable and had me locked in a facility. I've been drugged and trapped for weeks." I swallowed hard, fighting back tears. "And you know the worst part? They've disappeared. Not a word, not a visit, not even a trace. They threw me away like I was nothing, Jonathan. Nothing." Jonathan leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees as he tried to process everything I'd just told him. "Why would they do this to you?" he asked, his voice a mix of disbelief and anger. "I mean, Nathaniel, he loved you, didn't he? And Martha? Why would she go to such extremes?" I shook my head, my hands gripping the edge of the bench so tightly my knuckles turned white. "That's what I need to find out," I said, my voice firmer now. "It's not just about the inheritance, at least I don't think it is. They wanted me out of the picture completely. But why? Why go this far?" I looked at him, hoping he'd understand the urgency in my eyes. "I need your help, Jonathan. You were close to my father, and you know the business better than anyone. If anyone can help me figure this out, it's you." Jonathan sat back, letting out a slow breath as he processed what I'd told him. Then, without hesitation, he nodded. "All right," he said, his voice steady. "I believe you, Charlotte. And if what you're saying is true, we can't waste any time. You need a safe place, somewhere no one will think to look for you." He glanced around the park, scanning for any signs of prying eyes. "I have a small property outside the city, nothing fancy, just a quiet place I use when I need to get away. You can stay there while we figure this out." Relief washed over me, though it was mixed with exhaustion. I followed him to his car, keeping my head down as we left the park. The drive was quiet, Jonathan glancing at me every now and then, concern etched into his face. When we arrived, the property was exactly as he'd described: small, simple, and tucked away from prying eyes. "It's not much," he said as he opened the door and helped me inside. "But it's safe. I'll bring you food, clothes, whatever you need." I nodded, too drained to say much more, but his kindness felt like the first ray of hope I'd had in weeks. The next morning, I woke up feeling slightly better. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't looking over my shoulder or hiding in the shadows. The small room Jonathan had prepared was modest but warm, a far cry from the cold, sterile walls of the asylum. I stretched gingerly, my body still aching from days of fear and exertion, but the clarity in my mind was something I hadn't felt in weeks. Jonathan arrived shortly after with a bag of groceries and a determined look on his face. "I've been thinking about everything you told me," he began as he set the bag down on the kitchen counter. "I contacted someone, an old friend who works as a private investigator. I told him what little I know, and he's agreed to help. We need to figure out exactly what Nathaniel and Martha did, who they worked with, and why." His voice was steady, but I could see the worry in his eyes. "This isn't going to be easy, Charlotte. But if they've left a trail, we'll find it." For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of hope. Someone was finally on my side, and I wasn't going to let Nathaniel and Martha win. A week later, the door creaked open, and Jonathan stepped inside, his face grim but focused. Behind him followed a man who looked like he belonged on the cover of a detective novel, tall, sharp-eyed, with an air of quiet authority. He carried a weathered leather briefcase in one hand and nodded politely at me as Jonathan introduced him. "Charlotte, this is David Harper. He's the private investigator I hired. David, this is Charlotte." David set his briefcase on the small kitchen table and opened it with practiced precision. "Ms. Anderson, I've spent the last week piecing together what happened to you," he began, pulling out a thick stack of documents, photos, and handwritten notes. "It's worse than we initially thought, and frankly, it's astonishing how far they went to cover their tracks." He laid out the first set of papers, official-looking forms with signatures and seals. "This," he said, pointing to a medical report, "is a fraudulent psychiatric evaluation. Nathaniel and Martha hired a psychiatrist, Dr. Evelyn Marks, to fabricate this report. It states that you were a danger to yourself following your father's death, and that you needed immediate psychiatric intervention." I stared at the document, my stomach turning. But how could they make that stick? I was fine. Grieving, but fine. David nodded grimly. "They knew grief alone wouldn't hold up, so they exaggerated your behavior. Claims of paranoia, erratic mood swings, even self-harm, none of which were corroborated. That report was the foundation for what came next." He slid another paper forward. "This is the expedited court order, signed by Judge Leonard Grayson, a name that appears on several questionable cases I've investigated before. He was bribed to fast-track the order, bypassing the usual scrutiny." Jonathan leaned against the wall, his arms crossed, his face growing darker with every word. David continued, pulling out another set of documents. "Once the court order was signed, it was sent directly to the facility where you were admitted. The owners of that institution, Dr. Paul Reynolds and his partners, are known for accepting high-profile patients with special circumstances. They've been under the radar for years, taking bribes to keep people out of sight and under control." He placed a photo of Reynolds and Nathaniel, shaking hands at what appeared to be a private meeting. "This was taken 3 days before your commitment." My breath caught and my hands trembled as I reached for the photo. "Nathaniel, he planned this. They both planned this," I whispered, my voice barely audible. David nodded again. "Not only did they plan it, but they also ensured you'd stay heavily medicated, reducing your chances of reaching out or appearing coherent if anyone visited." He tapped another paper, a ledger showing payments. "Here's the money trail. Nathaniel transferred $250,000 to Dr. Reynolds the day after you were admitted. That payment bought your silence." I felt like I couldn't breathe, the room spinning as the weight of their betrayal hit me. "And Martha?" I asked, my voice raw. David's expression hardened. She was instrumental. Communications between her and Nathaniel show that she pushed for this. She convinced him it was the only way to secure your inheritance. Without you in the picture, they'd gain full control of the Anderson estate. He pulled out one last piece of evidence, a series of emails between Nathaniel, Martha, and Dr. Marks. They discussed everything in chilling detail, fabricating the report, bribing the judge, and ensuring I'd be kept sedated indefinitely. They were thorough, David admitted, but they underestimated two things. One, your resilience, and two, my team's ability to dig through the mess they left behind. Jonathan, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. Charlotte, this is enough to take them down. With this evidence, we can not only expose what they've done, but ensure they're held accountable. His voice was firm, but I could see the anger simmering beneath. I looked at the spread of evidence before me, proof of the lengths they'd gone to strip me of my freedom, my sanity, and my life. My fear began to give way to something stronger, something that had been building since the day I escaped. Determination. They thought they could destroy me, I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. But they're going to learn just how wrong they were. When Jonathan and David left, the house fell silent again, leaving me alone with the weight of everything I'd just learned. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of evidence, the damning proof of what Nathaniel and Martha had done to me. My hands trembled as I traced the edges of one of the photos, a snapshot of Nathaniel shaking hands with that awful doctor, Paul Reynolds. It felt surreal, like I was looking at a stranger instead of the man I once loved with all my heart. Nathaniel. His name echoed in my mind like a haunting melody I couldn't silence. How could someone I trusted so deeply, someone who had held me during my darkest moments after my father's death, do something so brutal? The memories of us together came flooding back, the laughter we shared, the promises we made, the way he looked at me as if I were his whole world. Was any of it real? Or was it all just part of some long con, orchestrated by his manipulative mother? I pressed my hands to my face, the tears finally spilling over. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the cruel, calculated way they'd stripped me of my life, as if I were nothing more than an obstacle to be removed. The next morning, Jonathan arrived at the small property earlier than usual, his face tense but energized. "Charlotte," he said, motioning for me to sit with him at the table. "David and I spoke with the authorities last night. After reviewing the evidence, they've confirmed we have a strong case, strong enough to take Nathaniel and Martha into custody immediately." I blinked at him, the words almost too overwhelming to process. "So, it's happening?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded firmly. "Yes. They've issued warrants for both of them, Nathaniel and Martha. The authorities are coordinating to ensure they're apprehended simultaneously. It'll be discreet but swift." Relief and anxiety flooded me all at once. Relief that justice might finally be within reach, but anxiety at the thought of facing the fallout. "What happens to them now?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. Jonathan leaned forward, his tone reassuring. "They'll be taken in for questioning first. Once in custody, the evidence we've gathered will speak for itself." Jonathan glanced at me as he stood to leave. "By the way," he said, his tone calm but firm, "they already have officers watching the mansion. If Nathaniel or Martha try to run, they'll be caught before they get anywhere." After Jonathan left, I stared at the phone for what felt like hours, the weight of everything pressing down on me. Finally, I couldn't hold back any longer. With trembling hands, I dialed Nathaniel's number. The line rang twice before he picked up. "It's over, Nathaniel," I said, my tone sharper than I expected. There was a beat of silence on the other end before he replied, "Charlotte? Oh my God, is it really you? I've been so worried about you. Where are you? Are you okay?" "Cut the act, Nathaniel," I said sharply, my voice like steel. "I didn't call to hear your lies. I know everything." There was a beat of silence on the other end before he spoke again, this time more cautiously. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his tone measured but tinged with nervousness. "Where have you been? People have been looking for you. I was worried sick." "Worried?" I scoffed, gripping the phone tighter. "You mean worried I'd escape? Worried I'd find out about the lies you and your mother spun to have me locked away?" I didn't let him interrupt. "Save it, Nathaniel. I know about the fake diagnosis, the bribes, the payments to keep me drugged and out of the way. It's over." Nathaniel hesitated, his voice faltering slightly. "Charlotte, I don't know where you're getting this from, but you've been through so much lately. Maybe you're confused." "Don't you dare patronize me," I snapped, cutting him off. "You think I don't know what you've done? I have the proof, Nathaniel. The bribes, the documents, the payments to the clinic. It's all out in the open now. You and Martha thought you could bury me, but you underestimated me." Nathaniel was quiet for a moment, and I could hear his shaky breath on the other end of the line. "Charlotte, I didn't know what else to do," he finally stammered, his voice breaking slightly. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. Martha said it was for your own good. She said you were spiraling after your father died. I thought we were helping you." "Helping me?" I said, my voice rising with disbelief. "Do you even hear yourself, Nathaniel? You drugged me, locked me away, and stripped me of my life. You didn't help me. You tried to erase me." "I didn't want to erase you," he snapped suddenly, the facade cracking. I didn't want to lose everything. Martha said if you were declared unfit, we could take control of the estate until you recovered. I thought it was temporary. I thought—" "You thought I'd what? Thank you for ruining my life?" I interrupted, my fury bubbling over. "Be honest, Nathaniel. You never intended to give anything back. This wasn't about helping me. This was about greed. Admit it!" "No!" he shouted, his voice desperate now. "I loved you, Charlotte. I still do. I swear to God I never wanted to hurt you. Martha, she made it sound like the only way. She kept pushing and pushing, and I was weak, okay? I listened to her because I thought it was what I had to do." "Stop hiding behind her," I yelled, my chest heaving with anger. "You signed those papers, Nathaniel. You made the payments. You stood by while they drugged me and let me rot in that place. Don't you dare try to make this about her. Take responsibility for once in your life." "I didn't know it would get that bad," he shouted back, his voice breaking completely. I thought it would be easy. That you'd be out of the way for a little while, and then we could figure it out later. I didn't know they'd keep you drugged like that. I didn't know you'd—" His voice trailed off, the weight of his guilt sinking in. "You didn't know?" I said bitterly, my tone dripping with contempt. "You didn't want to know. You closed your eyes and let her manipulate you because it was easier than standing up for what was right. And now you're going to pay for it." Nathaniel's voice was barely a whisper now. "Charlotte, I swear. I'll make it right. I'll tell them everything. I'll go to the authorities, just... Please believe me. I never stopped loving you." "Loving me?" I repeated, my voice cold. "If this is what your love looks like, I don't want it. You and Martha destroyed everything, Nathaniel. There's no fixing this." For a moment the line was silent except for his shaky breathing. "Charlotte," he said finally, his voice broken. "I'm sorry. I don't know what else to say." "You can say it to the police," I said flatly, and before he could respond, I hung up. My hand hovered over the receiver for a moment before I let out a shaky breath. It wasn't closure, but it was enough, for now. The next morning, I stood across the street from the mansion I once called home, watching as the police swarmed the property. The flashing lights of their vehicles reflected off the windows, casting an almost surreal glow over the scene. My heart pounded as I watched officers march up the front steps, their knock on the door firm and commanding. Moments later, the door opened, and there they were, Nathaniel and Martha. Nathaniel's face was pale, his usual composure completely shattered. As the officers cuffed his hands behind his back, he looked around wildly, his eyes searching the crowd that had gathered. When his gaze landed on me, his entire body tensed. "Charlotte!" he shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "Charlotte, please, let me explain." He tried to step toward me, but the officers restrained him, pulling him back. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just stared at him, my face a mask of cold indifference. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of a reaction, not anymore. His pleas grew more frantic as the officers led him toward one of the waiting cars. "Charlotte, I love you. Please, don't do this." His voice faded as they forced him into the back seat. Martha, on the other hand, was the picture of defiance. She held her head high, her expression unreadable as they cuffed her hands. She didn't say a word, didn't even glance in my direction. Her pride was unshakable, even now. It didn't matter. Her silence spoke volumes, and her arrogance would crumble soon enough. As the police cars pulled away, taking them to face the consequences of their actions, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, anger, sadness, and something else I couldn't quite name. I turned and walked away, not looking back. They had tried to erase me, to destroy everything I was, but they hadn't won. I was still standing, and finally, I felt like I could breathe again. Hey there! Did you like the story? If you did, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot and makes sure you won't miss out on more great stories we share here. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.